right, good morning and welcome to Tech Talk Tuesday. This is, I believe, our 13th Tech Talk Tuesday. So it's been a lot of fun. We've done a lot of talking about cybersecurity, a lot of talking about things related to cybersecurity, like doing backups and having an incident response plan and things like that. And all of those are on our YouTube channel. So it's YouTube at Nuage Tech. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit different, and it in a roundabout way, it does tie into cybersecurity, but not directly. People take shortcuts when their computers aren't operating at peak efficiency. So it is important from that perspective, but we're talking more from the productivity perspective today. Turbocharge Your Tech, mastering computer optimization for peak performance. The top 10 things to do today to improve your cybersecurity is actually a little more than 10. I think it's 15, I believe we have. I added more as we went. So without further ado, welcome. I am Scott Gummer, owner of Nuage Tech. We are a proactive IT cybersecurity and compliance service provider based in Meriden, Connecticut. We also have a satellite office in Tampa, and we are growing. Partly because people want their computers to operate at peak efficiency. And I thought I'd introduce a little humor today as well. I keep hitting the escape key, but I'm still here. How many of us have felt like that? Especially this time of year, we're ready for that holiday break, take a few extra days off from work, and have some fun, enjoy our families, enjoy not having to wake up early and get to work and the hustle and bustle of the workday. We're all ready for that, I'm sure. And I just one quick question poll today. I'm going to launch here. Does your computer perform the way you want it to? Sorry for the typo. Yes, no, or used to. Yes, that's great. That's awesome, because I think most of us today say it used to. You got that computer fresh out of the box, plugged it in, and it went whizzing away. And then over the years, little by little, slowed down. I just fixed a few computers this week to help speed them up. And some of the things we did, I'm going to talk about today. But it's so good. Your computer's performing the way you want it to. That's awesome. So who is tired of slow computers? I think anybody who's experienced a computer that occasionally, times out or freezes, or you get the spinning wheel, or you get the just hangs, or suddenly you get blue screen, or all of these things, they can be frustrating. And then I always joke that Microsoft always knows when you're in a rush. So if you tell, you sit down on your computer, you're just trying to edit a file real quick or look something up real quick, and suddenly your computer doesn't want to work properly. Or, Windows says we have an update and we need to restart your computer, something like that. So you all know by now that I love my statistics. So here's some interesting stuff that I thought I'd share with you. Increased productivity with dual monitors. Studies show that using dual monitors can increase productivity by up to 30 to 40%. This setup allows users to easily compare documents, multitask, and manage large amounts of data more efficiently. I got to tell you, I have 5 monitors, and I would never go back to a single monitor. As a matter of fact, I'm going to purchase a monitor extension. I don't know what you would call it, but it sits on top of my laptop screen and then gives me 3 screens instead of 1, so that I have that even when I'm using my laptop. So for those of you out there saying, oh, that, couple $100 for a new monitor is too much money, think about the increase in productivity, 30 to 40%. The impact of solid state drives on performance. Replacing a traditional hard disk drive with a solid state drive, SSD, can improve computer boot times by 40 to 60%. This upgrade significantly reduces the time taken to load applications and access data. Solid state drives are similar to thumb drives, USB drives, where they have no moving parts. So the hard drives that we've become accustomed to over the years, they have spinning cylinders inside. And over time, the more the cylinders spin, the slower it gets, and things crash and things break, and there's chunks of data that are messed up, and all of these things impact the speed of a hard drive. Well, solid state drive doesn't have those problems. So having the solid state drive in your computer improves boot times by 40 to 60%. We used to joke about coming into the office, turning on a computer, and go get a cup of coffee and go freshen up in the bathroom and things like that because you have time. Well, with a solid state drive, you don't have that time anymore. Effectiveness of keyboard shortcuts. Regular use of keyboard shortcuts can increase productivity by as much as 64%. It saves time by reducing your reliance on mouse movements and clicks. So perfect example of this is Control C for copy, Control X for cut, and Control V for paste. Those are some of the more common keyboard shortcuts, but there are tons of them out there. Instead of doing right click and copy and right click and paste, this Control C, V, and X speed things up significantly. Computer downtime and productivity loss on average. Employees experience 22 minutes of daily downtime due to computer-related issues, equating to over 91 hours in a year of lost productivity in a year. So that slow computer equates to 91 hours of lost productivity in a year. That's a little more than 2 weeks, two weeks and 10 hours of work lost in a year. Speed of internet connection, conversation we have frequently with clients. A 10 megabit per second increase in internet speed correlates to a 0.9 to 1.5% rise in employee productivity. So think about it. You have 150 megabits per second today. You upgrade to 300 megabits per second. And that is, what is that? That would be a 100% increase in employee productivity. That's pretty impressive. And now you can get gigabit speed depending on where you are and what offers are out there. The benefits of regular software updates. Keeping software up to date can improve computer performance by up to 15%. Regular updates provide necessary patches to improve efficiency, reduce bugs, and protect against malware, which can slow down a computer significantly. So that is going to be part of our conversation today, but making sure that your software and your operating system is up to date will help improve efficiency, except for the occasional time, almost every month this year, that Microsoft had an issue with their update. Well, we won't talk about that. And we'll get into the I think it's 15 ways that you can improve your computer's performance, whether it's your work computer, your home computer. Now, some of these things, depending on where you work, might be controlled by your IT or some other third party that's taking care of some of this for you, or some of these things you may have to have help with depending on the scenario. So this first one is software updates, operating system and software updates, especially with Microsoft, but this applies to Apple as well. This applies to your iPhones. This applies to your Android phones, all of those things. You should be performing software updates when they are available, with a caveat, and I'll get to that in a second. But a lot of the updates, so for example, the first Tuesday of every month, which was last Tuesday for December, they release feature updates. And the feature updates often address things on the operating system that are not operating the way they're supposed to operate, whether they're failing or they're not operating efficiently or something along those lines. A lot of times that's what they address. The second Tuesday of the month, which is today, as we're recording this, is the security updates for Microsoft. So they release security updates to address vulnerabilities. And yes, they come out every month. There's always vulnerabilities that they have to address. And then they release the patch to your computer, and it is up to you or your IT, whoever handles that, to then push those patches through. Now, typically we wait a few days. So usually Friday night, we apply the updates. So it comes out today. This Friday, we'll push the updates through. And the reason we do that is because, as I mentioned a few moments ago, Microsoft sometimes breaks things with their updates. So we want to make sure we test it first. And then we also are are involved in a few tech communities, so we look to see if anybody else notices anything. And I don't think there's been anything serious over the last few months, but earlier this year, it was almost every month there was some serious issues with Microsoft updates. Most other software vendors fall in line with the Microsoft schedule. So Microsoft releases their security updates on the second Tuesday. Almost everybody else releases similar updates around the same time in a month. So you can usually safely patch everything the same week. So again, on Friday night, we patch all third-party software. So if I use Google Chrome as the example, that'll get patched as well. Now with Google Chrome, a lot of times they've had multiple vulnerabilities this year. So we also patch that as we go. So usually Chrome will update itself. If you see that in the top right corner of Chrome, it says a restart is necessary to complete an update, then just relaunch the browser and it's done. So sometimes the updates, a lot of times for the browsers, all of them, Chrome, Firefox, Edge, are to help speed them up. So Chrome now has this nice little feature where if you have a bunch of tabs open, which let's face it, a lot of us do that, it'll put the tabs that you're not using to rest. So kind of like when your computer screen goes to screensaver, it's a similar idea. So it's no longer using your computer's resources to keep that tab open until you go back to it. Uninstall unnecessary programs. Again, this could also tie to cybersecurity, and we actually talked about this last week during last week's presentation. But from another perspective, having unnecessary programs on your computer takes up storage space and could take up other system resources because they may be running even when you're not using them. So uninstalling unnecessary programs is a simple yet effective way to optimize your computer's performance. Over time, computers can accumulate software that is no longer in use. And again, going back to last week, sometimes those programs also have vulnerabilities because they haven't been updated. These programs take up valuable disk space, but also run background processes that slow down your system. So any unnecessary programs no longer being used, get rid of them, especially if they're free programs, because you could always re-download them if you need them again. And the example I used last week was GIMP. GIMP is a photo editing software similar to Photoshop, but it's free. It's not quite as powerful as Photoshop, but if you don't want to spend the money on Photoshop, it's a great alternative. And I've seen computers where they've installed it, they forgot it was there, and years later we scanned the computer and it's a vulnerability. So get rid of them if you're not using them. And I would also strongly encourage you to get rid of any programs that would allow someone else to remotely access your computer if they're not being used by an IT team. Clean up your hard drive. Doesn't mean take it out, throw it in soap, water. That would finish your hard drive off for sure. But doing things like, so on Windows, you could do a disk cleanup. There are utilities on Mac to do the same thing. You run disk cleanup and it removes things like temporary files, cookies, system cache, Windows update files that are no longer needed, things like that. And what that does is it clears drive space on your computer and gives you extra storage space. Windows does use storage space to help speed up your computer. So there's something called virtual memory. And what it does is it usually, depending on your computer, but usually it matches your actual physical memory in your computer. So if you have a computer with 16 gigs of memory, we'll also have a 16 gig storage file or virtual memory file so that you can match the speed of the memory. That's not always the case. Sometimes they, if your computer has a lot of physical memory, it may reduce the virtual memory file to save storage space because it does take up storage space. But also, by clearing this unnecessary stuff, no longer needed stuff, then you have that extra space for that virtual memory file and for other activities. And note, I said that Microsoft has and disk cleanup utility, you don't need to download a third-party software such as CCleaner to do that. CCleaner does do other things that the disk cleanup doesn't do, but for that purpose, you do not need a third-party software. Defragmenting your hard disks for HDDs. So I want to clarify what the difference is here. So we have HDDs, hard disk drives, that came with computers up until more recently. I don't know if they're making computers with those anymore. For the most part, most newer computers have solid-state drives, SSDs. Now we're at a period in time where there's still a lot of computers out there with hard drives, HDDs. Even though there has been an influx of solid-state drives for a while, solid-state drives were very expensive. That is no longer the case. You can get, I just purchased a 2 terabyte solid-state drive for $130 for a client. So they're pretty affordable now. And not only that, but in a lot of cases, you don't need a lot of drive space anymore, thanks to programs like OneDrive or Dropbox. But if you still have an HDD, a hard disk drive, older style hard drive, defragment your hard disk is an important maintenance task for computers that have these drives. So over time, what happens is files on the hard drive become fragmented, which means that you may have a part of a file on one side of the hard drive and a part of the file on the other side of the hard drive. And because they're fragmented, they're not put together as one file. It takes longer for those files to open. So running a defrag on it will put those files back together and speed things up for you a little bit. Again, not necessary on a solid-state drive. Startup programs. These are programs that start when you turn your computer on. So some of them are necessary. It's necessary for your security program to run when your computer turns on. So you want that to run so that it can check for malware. It can check to see if there's anything going on your computer that shouldn't be going on. OneDrive or Dropbox should probably run when your computer turns on, because you may need access to those files once the computer is running properly. But then there are other files that don't need to run. So the one that drives me nuts is Microsoft Edge and Microsoft Teams. Those two programs don't need to run when your computer turns on. Chrome is another one that does that sometimes. But I see it a lot with Edge and Teams, and it seems like every Windows update makes them go back to starting with the computer. Just because they don't start with your computer doesn't mean they're not available. It just means that they're not starting when your computer turns on. And by doing this, it helps free up computer resources that you might be using for something else. So going in and disabling any programs from starting up with your computer that aren't critical to computer operation and computer security is a good way to speed up your programs or your computer. Another example is if you don't use OneDrive, then it doesn't need to start with your computer. So OneDrive comes with Windows now. If it's there and it's starting with your computer, but you're not using it, what's the point of it starting with your computer? So the way to do that, because I get asked this one a lot, and it's an easy fix. If you open the task manager, which means you're just right-clicking on the start menu on your computer and selecting task manager, or Control-Alt-Delete and select task manager, and then go to the startup tab. So easier to find on Windows 10 because it's right at the top and it says startup. On Windows 11, it's on the left-hand side and it's a graphical icon, and I don't remember what it looks like, but if you hover over them, it'll tell you startup. You go there and you just select which ones you want to enable and disable. You click on it and you select enable or disable depending on the setting it's currently at, and that turns it off from starting up. So there's no reason for Edge to start with your computer. There's no reason for Teams to start with your computer, or almost any other program. QuickBooks is another one that does this a lot. No need for that. And that will help speed up your computer startup and your computer operation overall. Because remember, the more applications that are running when your computer's on, the more of the system resources it is using. So if you're not in QuickBooks all the time, then why does it start with your computer? There's no need for that. And it goes with Edge. I don't know anybody who actually uses Edge. I know one person. So unnecessary. Increasing RAM. RAM stands for random access memory. And what RAM does is it stores temporary program information in your computer. So it's considered volatile, meaning that it's not permanent. Once you turn your computer off, whatever was there is gone. Well, today our computers are faster than ever, but our applications that are on a computer also require more resources more than ever. So RAM in your computer, which is a chip, looks just like what that is in the image there. That stores these temporary instructions for the computer to operate and function properly. But unfortunately, what happens is the more stuff you have open, the more space it's using, the more of the memory it's using on that chip, on that card. I'll call it a card. And the more of the RAM it's using, the slower your computer is going to get. So often, again, if you go back to Task Manager, I just talked about how to access that, you can see how much of the memory it's using. And if it's, constantly at 80, 90, 100%, then your computer is going to run slow. So one of the ways to fix that is to install more RAM. So you just look up your computer model on the internet. Great website for that is Crucial. They also sell memory cards there. You don't have to buy them there, but they will tell you what your computer has and what it's capable. You can look up what it has on your computer, and then you can see what your computer is capable of handling on the Crucial website, and then just purchase what you need from there. So, for example, I told you I just updated the drives on 2 computers over the weekend from hard drives to solid state drives. We also upgraded the RAM. So I looked online at these 2 computers. One was a Dell, one was Asus, and looked them up and found that they could both run at 16 gigs of RAM. The computers are a little bit older. One had 8, one had 12, so we just upgraded to 16 for both of them. Looked up what kind of RAM they take, ordered the RAM, put them in. It's not a hard job to do as long as the computer's not too hard to take apart. Most desktops today are not that bad. And you just put it in, but you do have to be careful not to touch other things inside. You have to be careful not to you have to discharge your static electricity before you go in there. So consider that, because you could destroy the motherboard if you don't. But it's not a hard job to do. Most of the time, 10, 15 minutes in a desktop it takes. If it's a laptop or a all-in-one computer, it takes a little bit longer. Increasing your RAM. A lot of the newer computers today are capable of 32, 64. My laptop has 128. So, and then there are other components. So some computers may have a video card that also has additional RAM. Install an SSD or replace your hard disk with an SSD. This is what I was talking about earlier that I did for 2 computers over the weekend. I've done this with I've resurrected computers that were older by just changing the hard disk drive with an SSD, a solid state drive. Or in some cases, even there's a newer style drive now that's even smaller and also no moving parts. Some computers can handle those as well. So solid state drives just means there's no moving parts. So nothing spins, nothing can crash. And it means access to information and data on that drive is faster. It means boot up times are faster. And you'll be a lot happier. This is usually the number one thing for me to do when a client says their computer's slower. I swap hard disk drive for a solid state drive unless they want a new computer, which is also a possibility. Not a hard job again. The most difficult piece is if they want to maintain whatever's on the current hard drive, then you have to clone it or move the data over. That's the most difficult part. The actual hardware part, not as complicated. Run antivirus and malware scans. Let me start with this. So first of all, you only need one antivirus program on your computer, and they're not really called antivirus anymore. Most of them are endpoint detection and response, EDRs. And what that means is it looks for malicious activities on your computer and terminates those activities, hopefully. But whether you have an antivirus program like McAfee or Norton, or you're using one of the more modern programs, we use Sentinel-1 here, they do use system resources, number one. And number two, if you have more than one, they're going to compete against each other. And that's going to create problems for your computer. Some malware programs use a lot of system resources. So you'll want to make sure that your system can handle it. But let's assume you have it, because in most cases, if you have Windows 10 or 11, you have at least Windows Defender. Then you'll want to run routine scans. And the reason for that is you're checking for malicious content or even unwanted content. So adware is not really malicious. It's more annoying than malicious. You'll still want to get rid of it though, because it is also eating up system resources. So malware will definitely eat up system resources, beyond the security piece of things. It's also going to eat up system resources, make your computer perform very poorly. Usually that is a sign of malware when your computer suddenly performs much worse than it used to. So now you have malware on your computer and it's just chewing up on your system resources. It's pegging your memory, your CPU usage, and maybe eating up hard drive space, especially if it's encrypting things, and then you really have problems. So run malware scans. It's also important to use a modern browser for the same reason, and the reason is if you go to a website that has malicious code in it. This was happening a lot for a little while, where you'd show up on a website and all of a sudden your computer fan starts racing, your processor starts running at 100%. And the reason for that is they had crypto jacking software on their website. So they were using your computer's resources to try to do crypto mining. I don't know if that's still active, if they figured a way of how to protect against that. But sometimes even a normal website, just poorly coded, can make your computer run hard. And so it's important to have stuff on your system to prevent that from happening. Modern browsers will tell you this site is malicious. Check for hardware issues. Most computers today have built-in utilities where you could check for any hardware issues. So the main components of computer hardware, you have the motherboard, which then it has a processor, RAM, we talked about, and a storage device, whether it's solid state or a hard drive. They may have other things like a video card or extra cards for different reasons. Extra, you can see it on this image, these little red, yellow, and blue slots here. Those are for other components to add to the computer. Some might have multiple hard drives or solid state drives, things like that. Every now and again, just running a hardware scan, most computers have this program built in, and you have to interrupt your computer booting up. A lot of computers, it's F12 to do that, or F2, and that interrupts your computer, and then it allows you to run a hardware scan. Sometimes you'll find that the computer may boot into this automatically because it's detected that something is wrong. So something else that you might look for. Once you get to the utility, you just tell it to run a hardware test, and it tests all of the hardware on your computer and it'll let you know if anything is wrong. There are third-party utilities you can also download and install. Just be careful of what you're downloading. Make sure it's something legitimate, not some kind of malicious content or some kind of scam that's going to cause you more heartache than it's worth. So every now and again, run hardware scans. There are tools outside of Windows that'll check your hard drive. and tell you whether or not it has issues. Run smart tests, which just test the viability of your hard drive, and then there are other more advanced scans where it checks the read-write access of your hard drive, tells you if there's failed blocks on the hard drive and things like that. I see a note here. This past Sunday 60-minute segment on super cool computers coming was really cool. Maybe next time you can allow the AI companion button. I'm not familiar with the AI companion button. Is that a new Zoom feature? Is that the one where it takes the notes? I think it takes notes. I think I have seen that. If it is, I'll look into that for the next one. But yes, checking your hardware is important. Clean your computer. This is the physical cleaning type. What happens with computers after a while is they build up dust. And I have taken computers apart and there's been caked on dust, just layers and layers of dander and sometimes pet fur. And I have been lucky. I have not taken any computers apart and had live animals in there, but I've heard stories of mice living in computers. I've heard stories of cockroaches in computers. I've heard stories of spiders in computers. So hasn't happened to me, thankfully. But if you don't take your computer apart every now and again and clean it, then you will begin to run hotter because it doesn't have a way to ventilate. So you get a can of compressed air. That's what that can is in this person's hands. And you blow out all the dust. Make sure the computer's unplugged, disconnected, and you can wear gloves like this person's wearing. It is cold, so it will be cold against your skin. It won't hurt you, but it is cold. But also you need to discharge static electricity. So it should be on like a rubber mat like this and discharge yourself. There is a clip that you can put on yourself so that it discharges your static electricity. You blow out all the dust. Again, desktops are usually not that hard to take apart. Take them apart, blow out the dust, put it back together. You don't need to take all the components out. You just take the cover off. Blow out any of the vents in the fan, and then done with it. Optimize power settings. This is kind of twofold. So you can optimize power settings on your computers. So this is I think it's sleep-in power. If you just search sleep-in power on your Windows computer, you'll be able to see that. But also, by optimizing it, it'll make your computer run faster. But also, you may not be using your computer all the time. So if you know that, you're going to leave at 5 o'clock at night, maybe you turn off your computer. You set it so that your computer goes to sleep at 5:30 or something like that. If you don't want your computer, and you should have a lock screen on for security reasons, a lock screen that turns on after 5 or 10 minutes. But also, you should have it so that it goes to sleep after a certain amount of time, because that will preserve energy in your home or your office, wherever you are. A lot of cybersecurity plans enforce this now. So we enforce this with a lot of our clients now, where the lock screen comes on after 10 minutes, and that's for cybersecurity reasons. But for energy usage, you'll want to have that setting as well. But optimizing power settings is a critical step, especially for laptop users, to balance performance and energy efficiency. So if you feel like you could use a little boost, you change the performance, you move the performance slider up a little more and remove the energy efficiency slider down a little bit. Again, considering green energy, keep that in mind when you're figuring out what the best power settings are for your computer. Update drivers. This is an important one. I just had an interesting incident last week or the week before, I think, where printers were just printing random gibberish. Nobody sent the print job to the printer. It was just printing random gibberish for no reason. And it turns out it was outdated drivers. Drivers are software that powers the hardware. It's the best way I can state it. So if you have printers, then you have a driver that powers that printer from your computer. If you have cameras, then you have drivers for that. If you have keyboards, you have drivers for that. Mouse drivers for that. Monitors, drivers for that. So every piece of hardware that connects to your computer has a related driver that goes with it. And updating your driver sometimes improves efficiency and also security when there's an issue with that driver. Regular driver updates are crucial for the smooth operation of your hardware and can significantly enhance the overall performance and stability of the computer. Some corrupted drivers or drivers that need an update because of instability will often make your computer run well, that you could blue screen, but it could also make your computers run poorly, or certain aspects of your computer, like it might not print, or it might print gibberish randomly. Network optimizations. Using network optimizations is particularly beneficial for those with heavy internet usage, as it can significantly enhance your online experience. So some of the ways you can optimize network, and this you might need a professional for, but you can set up your networking equipment so that it filters traffic and prioritizes traffic. So you may have voice over IP in your office, which is phone service over the internet. You may have certain applications that should have priority over other things. You know, you may want to block out certain types of traffic. So I have clients that block out social media so we can block streaming videos and things like that, streaming video services. And they block this out because it improves bandwidth overall. So you prioritize what it is you do on your network, and you also set it up so that certain types of content can't be accessed while within the office environment. So you connect to the office environment, whether it's your own device or a company supplied device, then we can control the traffic that goes to that device while you're on our network, and gives us an opportunity to optimize network performance. Reduce visual effects. So Microsoft and Mac both have visual effects built in, and you can turn these on or turn them off. Often they're not, some of them are not on by default, but visual effects, like maybe you have a active background. So the background it changes, or it's got like a short looping video that plays or something like that. Reducing these often improves the performance of your computer. This is usually more of a way to do this in older systems. Newer systems can usually handle this type of stuff, but reducing any visual effects that occur on your computer will help improve your system's performance overall. Visual effects such as animations, shadows, and transparency can consume significant amount of system memory and processing power. I usually turn these off by default, no matter how powerful my system is. I don't really see the point of doing them. But to each their own. It is a great way to reduce or improve the overall performance of your computer, though. And our last one on the list here is back up your data. Now, this doesn't directly impact the speed of your computer, unless you're running out of space on your computer. Then yes, move some stuff off and just put it in a backup somewhere, which does happen, and that's fine. If you're using up all the space on your computer. As I said, typically computers today don't have a lot of storage space built in. You could still buy them with a lot of storage space. I've purchased laptops with 8 terabytes of storage space. So that's a ton of storage space. And you could always add to it if you needed to. But most of the time, a lot of storage space is no longer needed because of services like OneDrive, Dropbox. You can upload to the cloud, and even if they're not stored locally on your computer, you still have access to them as long as you have an internet access. Backing up your data is a great way to free up space because now we can get rid of the data we no longer need because it's been backed up, depending on the backup service provider. So you have to be careful of that. How long are they going to store the data? There are other options like you can store in Amazon on their S3 service for very cheap. You could store tons of data up there very cheap in what they call cold storage, and then it's saved. And it's not costing a lot of money to save it there, and it won't go anywhere. You can set up to be redundant. So if one data center does go down, you have somewhere else that it's been backed up to again. And it really doesn't cost much at all. But backing it up just prevents you from losing productivity time because now you trying to recover that data that hasn't been backed up. If it's backed up and something goes horribly wrong with that computer, like it crashes or it gets stolen or something like that, then at least you have the backup of the data and you can restore it to the same device or a different device. And you don't have to worry about being productive again because you've already done this. It doesn't take long to restore from a backup, especially if it's a local backup. Now, there are some other, before we get to questions, there are a couple of other things you could do that I want to share with you. I am going to, okay, so I could do this here. Let me just, if you bring up an elevated command prompt, so you type in CMD and run as administrator. And I'm going to share this screen. And this first command will check for, and this is Windows specifically, will check for any issues within your system. So it's going to go fast because I have solid state drives and because I just did this recently. This tool, this utility can take a while if it is an older drive and the system doesn't have a lot of resources, and it does find issues. Now, I just did this last night, I believe, or day, maybe a couple days ago. So it shouldn't find anything wrong, but we'll find out in a moment. While we're waiting for that, if there are questions, feel free to ask. And then I'll show you the second command I run. And they're pretty similar in nature. The second one I run does checks for corruptions within the operating system. So it'll check for corruptions within Windows and then attempt to repair them. It's actually going a little slower than I thought it would. So to give you an idea of the computer I'm using for this presentation, has 5 monitors connected to it. And I'm usually using at least 4 of them. It has 2 terabytes of storage on 2 different drives. And I have, I don't remember if it was 64 gigs of RAM. But I didn't buy it that way. They had 1 terabyte of storage when I got it. And it had, yeah, 64 gigs of RAM. And it had maybe 16 gigs of RAM when I bought it. It has its own video card. And I only had, of course, at the time, 2 monitors. I've since expanded to 5 monitors. It helps me to work at a much faster rate. So I constantly trying to get things done, helping people with their computers so I can be remoted into multiple computers at the same time. I can create presentations and present and have the notes on one screen and the presentation on another screen. Just a lot more you could do with multiple screens. So that was one of the suggestions early on in the presentation, is to have dual monitors or more. I've seen people with 3, 4, 5 monitors now. So it does happen. Now I have to monitor a lot, so it makes more sense for me. But even dual monitors does make a difference to be able to copy and paste from one application to another, or one document to another, or from email to Word, or to a CRM, from email. All these different things help improve your overall productivity. This is almost done. Yeah, so I didn't find anything wrong, which is what I expected because I just did this a few days ago. This is the second one. If I can type correctly. And again, should go pretty quickly, but this will find issues with your Windows operating system. Mac has a few different ways, and maybe I'll just do a presentation only on Mac, probably in the new year. We only have one more Tech Tuesday left for 2023, if you could believe that. So we have the 19th next week, and that's it. And I think we're going to do Chat GPT again, because it has changed. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but this entire presentation, every single image, you may have noticed some of the images had misspellings. Every single image was created with Chat GPT. Oh, that's not true. The meme was not created with Chat GPT, but every other image was. So once this is done, then you can also run a check disk, and I'll show you what the command looks like, but I'm not actually going to run it because it will ask you to reboot, and it will run while the computer is rebooting. And that checks for actual problems with your hard drive. So, corrupted blocks on the hard drive, and plus I have solid state drive, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do it. Things like that. And this is something I did again when I was cloning these computers over the weekend and replacing the hard drives with solid state drives. Before I cloned, I did all of this because it would speed up the process of cloning. I installed new memory. I ran these utilities and a disk cleanup tool. I removed programs from startup that would slow the computer down. The chief complaint was that the computers were running slower than they would like. They wanted the computers to be faster. So I did all of these things to help speed up the computers. And there we go. So says the restore process completed successfully. Operation completed. So it didn't find anything wrong. It would have said it did. So nothing found there. And then the last command that I do is just check disk, repair, and find and repair. So just like that. And then if I do this, if I hit enter, it's gonna tell me it can't do it until I reboot. Do I want to do it when I reboot? So actually I can do that. And so I'm going to say no here because I don't want to do it, but you would say yes. And then the next time you reboot, it will run it. And depending on how bad the disk is, it could take a while. So I saw one yesterday morning that took almost an hour. I've seen them take longer than that. So it can take a while. All right. So if there are no questions, thank you again for attending. And if you want to follow us on any of the socials, @Nuage Tech, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and all of these are uploaded to YouTube. We have a channel just for that. It's the Tech Talk Tuesday channel. Not channel, sorry, playlist. So go to @Nuage Tech and go to playlist Tech Talk Tuesday. And all the previous week's editions are there. I believe there's 12. This would make 13. So until next week, have a good one. You get 6 minutes back. So go be productive. Thank you, everyone.